I was doing my hedge yesterday, and as you can see I made pretty good progress, got most of it done. Got to this bit at the end, just a little bit more to do when it started to rain. I started to rush to get it done before rain stopped play, and in my hurry went and did something rather stupid. I went and chopped the electric cable off, and as you can see it's made quite a mess. Now I'll be honest and admit that this is not the first time I've managed to chop the electrical cable on my hedge trimmer, and I found a couple of very effective ways of making this repair, both of which are relatively easy and not too expensive. However, I will say you are at the end of the day playing with electricity. Electricity is a very dangerous thing if you're not sure of what you're doing. So I would thoroughly recommend, if you're not confident in making this repair, that you would get somebody who's qualified or competent to do work like this, to do the repair for you. But as you'll see in this video, actually it's not very hard to do and relatively inexpensive to make this repair. So I'll now show you how to make this repair relatively quickly. Both methods will require the two wires inside, the blue and the brown, the neutral and the live, to be exposed and stripped back so that we can make the joint. And I'll show you the tools that I use to do each of the two repairs. So once you've exposed the two ends of each wire, you need to connect them, join them up in some way. One way is to use a crimp of this sort. This is relatively easy to do and quite quick. Basically one end of the wire goes in there, the other one goes in there, and then you use a crimp tool like the one here to squeeze that and crimp it so that it just holds the wires together. I've got a cheap crimp tool here. If you haven't got one of these more expensive types, these are about 7 or 8 quid in hardware shops. This one I think you could pick up from a pound shop, and I bought a load of these different size crimps from eBay. I think for a set of about 50 I paid a couple of pounds. So yeah, not very expensive. The other method is to use the good old-fashioned soldering iron with a solder to solder the two bits of wire together. So first of all, I'll show you just how you strip the two wires so they're ready for each of the two joints. So the first step is to remove the outer orange sheathing about 1 centimetre either side to expose the two wires, which we'll strip back and make the joint with. And I just use a good old-fashioned knife and do the deed. Now you've got to be careful when you are cutting the external outer sheathing so that you don't end up chopping the wire inside, which means that you're back to square one again. So what I tend to do is just score it slightly like this, so that you see where it's just about made a cut on the outside, and then I just gently push it in to the point where I think I've just felt it go through, and then when you keep folding it and then just making a slight cut, you'll find that it actually comes apart quite easily without you having to push it in all the way and risk chopping the two wires inside. So there we go. So that's come apart quite easily, and there you've got the two wires exposed. And you do the same with the other end. So there we are. We've stripped about 1 centimetre each side. What we now need to do is strip back those two wires ready to make our joints. Now, as I said earlier, these wire strippers I got from the pound shop. They're not that brilliant. They're very cheap and cheerful, and you know, you have to faff around a bit to get the work done with these. But you get the gist of what you do. You grip the wire that needs stripping in there. You can see the blue wire there, and then you just keep turning it and squeezing slightly, and hopefully that'll allow you to strip the ends off. If you don't have a wire stripper, you can actually use your Stanley knife to expose the ends, to strip the two wires. What I do is if you hold the one wire that needs stripping, put your Stanley knife underneath there, and then just gently roll your thumb backwards and forwards, just rolling that wire so that you're kind of making a cut all the way around. You might be able to just about see that I've managed to do that just there. Do that all the way around. Just be gentle when you do this, because what you don't want to do is start to cut away the copper underneath. It's just the outer sheathing you want. There you are. That's exposed. That one, and I'll just do that with the next one, and likewise with all four. Okay, so we've exposed the two wires. They've both been stripped back, ready for making the joints. For the first one, I'm going to use a crimp and a crimp tool to do the blue wire, which is the neutral. Now, the best way to do this, if you look carefully on the crimp tool, it is color coded. So there you have the yellow, the blue, and you can see the red dot there for the red crimps. That's just basically the size of the wire that it uses. I normally put the crimp in there, get it to the edge, as you can see there. I'm holding it fairly gently, but it's holding it in place. You then insert the wire into the crimp and squeeze, and it'll make the crimp joint for you. It's really straightforward. So let's do that now. Here we go. Just inserted that. Just push it in all the way and make sure that it's gone in all the way, so that the stripped bit of copper is touching the metal inside the crimp, so that you've got a sound electrical joint. There you are. It's all firm, and then you just squeeze. Go. When it squeezes, it's made the grip. There you go. You see a nice clean job there. It's really very easy to do, and doesn't take long at all. We'll do the same with the other blue wire at the other end, and that's it, job done. So here we are. I've done that end, as you can see there. So I'm now going to do the other end with the other bit of the cable. There's the blue wire. So let's do exactly the same. This is going to be a bit awkward because I'm actually trying to look through the camera, which makes it very difficult to do. But there we are. That's now gone in, pushing it firmly to make sure it's got the right grip, and then squeeze your crimp tool. It automatically releases when it's done, and there we are. Perfect, clean, neat, tidy joint, and it took me seconds to do, and there you are. That's the repair done. Now the next one, you can do it exactly the same way, and you've got two crimps side by side, and then we'll wrap that round with tape so that it's all protected and not exposed to water or moisture in any way. The advantage of using two crimps is that you don't have any exposed copper. If you imagine, I'm going to be soldering this one. If I'd soldered this one as well, then you've essentially got the potential of a short circuit, because the two could touch, even though you can separate them out using insulating tape, which is what I'll show you. If you were doing two solder joints, then you want to make sure that the two are totally insulated and there's no danger of a short circuit between the two. So we'll do that next. Okay, so we're now ready to solder the brown wire, the live wire. I'll be honest, I haven't got a great mini tripod, so I hope you can see that okay. I've tried to set it up as best as possible, but what you can see here is that I've twisted the two ends of the stripped brown wire together and try to keep it as solid as possible, as jointed as possible, because that's what we're going to be soldering now. So here's my soldering iron. I always just tin the soldering iron so that it gives it a nice connection with the melted solder and the exposed copper wires there, and then if you just put that on the brown on the copper wires, the stripped copper ends, it'll get hot very quickly, and then you just touch your soldering iron to the copper. You will eventually get the thing to start flowing into the joint there. You can see that. Just make sure you've got a good generous amount of solder on there so that it's a nice solid joint. There we are. That all looks pretty good to me. There we go. So as you can see there, a lot of solder on there. I know it's not the cleanest and the most impressive of solder joints, but it'll do the job. It's going to be quite solid. It's going to hold together. There you go. You'll get a better idea of what it looks like. That's quite a solid joint there. Obviously much more messier than crimping, but I just wanted to show you the two different methods of how you could do that if you didn't have a crimp tool and crimps at home. So there we have the two different types of joints. This one a lot cruder than the crimp version. This is soldered together, but will give you a very solid and reliable connection. And this, of course, a much neater solution, much quicker, but you need a crimp and a crimp tool to be able to do that. But as you can see, both relatively easy. I'm now going to show you how to insulate that to make sure that, I mean, if you did have two soldered joints, that you aren't going to get a short circuit. And then we'll cover the whole thing up and make sure that it's all nice, tight, all sealed properly, ready for use. So we're now ready to finish off the job. To do that, you can use insulation tape to cover the solder joint and the rest of the repair as well. But I personally prefer to use this stuff. It is absolutely magic. Gaffer tape, the amount of stuff I use it for around the house is just incredible. I find it very easy to use. It's very good, very solid, sticks really well, and will protect this particular joint through all the hard work that I'm going to put my hedge trimmer through. So yeah, gaffer tape is the stuff for me. I'm going to just cut some strips up now and first of all cover the solder joint. After that we'll do the rest of the joint. So here we go. I've cut a couple of strips of gaffer tape about 1 centimeter wide, which I'm now going to use to cover up the solder joint first of all. Just have to bear with me as I do this bit. There we go. Just keep going round and round till you've covered up the first. I do the central bit first, and then I'll get another piece and then just do the rest of it. If you find this a bit fiddly, what you can do, though I'm not sure if it helps much more, but you can use a screwdriver just to pull it through each time, if that helps you in any way. But yeah, just keep going round and round till you've covered up the entire solder joint. That's the main thing. The one thing about gaffer tape is that, you know, once you squeeze it all down, it does give you a really good solid tight joint. I'm just going to do this bit here, and then I think it should be ready for the whole thing to be covered up. So there we go. That's been covered up nicely. You can imagine the importance of making sure that that is totally covered up if you were using 2 solder joints, which you will do. You'll either use 2 solder joints or 2 crimps. I guess you're not going to do a mixture like I've done. Obviously, if I was doing this properly for myself, I would have just used the crimps all the way. It's so much neater and quicker, but at least the solder joint gives you an option if you don't have any crimps. So there we are, ready to be all covered up now. So I've got myself another piece of gaffer tape, which I'm going to start again, start about, so yeah, overlap basically half of your joint and half of the tape outside, the cable outside, and then you just keep going round and round as we did with the solder joint, and just make sure that the whole thing is nicely covered up. Again, this is where gaffer tape is so much better for me than insulation tape, because it really does mold around what you're doing and gives you a very solid, reliable, longer lasting I think insulation and covering off the whole thing. Now there you go, you see, so that is a start. I'm going to do the same thing, get another piece and then do that, and you'll find that actually that has covered the whole joint up quite nicely. I know it's not the prettiest thing in the world. It does look a bit ugly when you've got an bright orange cable and black duct tape or gaffer tape, but it's very practical and it does the job. And you know what, I need to finish my head job very soon anyway, so I'm not going to complain. Right, just do the second bit. It's quite hard to do this when you're watching the whole thing through a camera rather than using your own vision, but hopefully you get the gist of what we're doing here. I'm gonna actually just because I like to just be on the safe side, I'm gonna put one more layer of tape around that just to make sure it's all watertight, all very nicely compacted, secure, and it should be all ready to go. So there we are, there's the repair, and as they say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So let's see if that repair has indeed done the trick. Here we go. Yep, that works. That's great. So there we are. That's how you do it. I hope you found this useful. Hit the like button if you do.